How's it going, everybody? Recorded this video last week, but the file must have been corrupted because it didn't upload. But I was thinking last week, I was thinking to myself about invasives, and I know I've made a video about invasives before, and talking about how I'm not super concerned about invasives and only planting native flowers and plants and all that stuff. But I was just thinking more about it, and I think that there needs to be some more nuance when we're talking about invasive plants versus non-native plants versus native plants. It's very common, and I see it a lot on the Facebook pages that I'm a part of, and different, Facebook and Instagram pages that I follow. You have the group of people who think that we should only be planting, obviously this is for Florida because that's where I'm located, but we should only be planting native plants because anything else destroys our ecosystem. And I'm not trying to knock native plants, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be planting native plants. There's a lot of good that comes from that. One of the things is it does help the local wildlife because that's what they're accustomed to, and whether it be a host plant for butterflies or some sort of insect, or a food source for gopher tortoises or some other local herbivore or whatever. The flower could be something that our native bees and butterflies like. Of course, that goes, that creates the chain of, the gopher tortoises are healthier, and they, are more numerous, and their gopher tortoise, the holes that they live in, the dens that they live in, also provide shelter for native, rodents, native rattlesnakes, that sort of thing. And so it's all a big chain. So I'm certainly not knocking native plants, and I'm not trying to tell anybody, hey, don't plant native plants or don't worry about native plants, that's stupid, because it's not stupid. I mean, and the other good thing about native plants, from a perspective of growing and gardening and stuff, whether it be an edible plant or an ornamental, is that you generally don't have to worry about a plant acclimating to your microclimate, where you, like your yard, because every yard has a microclimate. Whether it be a balcony, an actual suburban yard, rural land, however many acres it is, it's all got their own little microclimates. But you don't really have to worry about native plants depending on adapting to that area. Usually they're already, for example, I just recently bought and planted a native coral honeysuckle that I got up at Scrubland Farms, and when I planted it, it never went into shock. It never, because a lot of times when you transplant, especially straight into the ground, if your soil is not the best, or if it's not raining a lot, if the sun has gotten more harsh, if it's heating up outside, a bunch of different things, it can cause the plant to go into shock, which is not a death sentence for plants. A lot of plants can recover from that if you take care of them, make sure they're getting lots of water, and just make sure that they're being cared for, feed them, water them. They can recover from shock. Shock does not necessarily mean you've lost the plant. But I noticed when I planted that native honeysuckle, it didn't go into shock. Not once. And this was like a few weeks ago that I bought it, and then when I came home, I transplanted it. And it's right in the open sun. It gets watered right now. It's getting watered every other day because we're not getting a lot of rain. But it never never went into shock. The leaves have looked good. It looks like it's going to be blooming again soon. So that's one of the things with planting native plants, is a lot of times when you plant whatever it is, if it's native to your area, it's not going to be as big of a struggle to get it to thrive. Pretty much you can put it in the ground and it's going to take off because it's already in a place that it likes. It's supposed to be here. Beautyberry is another one. I planted a beautyberry plant I think I planted it in the fall of last year, and of course it dropped all of its leaves and everything during winter because they're deciduous, but it's coming back now looking really full, and it's already starting to show signs of it's going to be blooming. And it never went into shock. It never really looked that bad. Maybe a little bit at first, but it quickly bounced back, especially once we started getting into spring. So, native plants are just easier to plant, there are some that are a little more fickle, but for the most part, native plants to your area are going to be easier to plant. It's going to require less babying of the plant to get it to thrive and to really take root. And there are some non-native and invasive plants that can be dangerous to the native animals and can be dangerous to humans. But there are also native plants that can be dangerous to humans. So, it doesn't necessarily, just because something is native doesn't mean that it's gets the stamp of approval across the board as this is a perfectly safe plant. I believe there is a native lantana in Florida, and lantana is poisonous to humans. So that doesn't mean that, okay, it's native, so it's no problem. Not really. But in general, native plants are easier to grow. They're not as dangerous potentially for the natural and native wildlife. For example, another example would be like the tropical milkweed that has become popular. Florida has native milkweed, but anytime I've gone to any of your big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that to buy milkweed, it's always tropical milkweed. And I don't know why, when we've got our own native milkweed species here, why aren't they cultivating and trying to sell that to repopulate it more, so that the monarchs that migrate through here have a place to, lay, because the milkweed is a host plant for monarchs. I don't know if the monarch butterflies consume the nectar from the milkweed. They may. I've not really observed to see, but it's a host plant for monarchs, meaning they lay their eggs on it, and the monarch caterpillars eat the leaves of the milkweed. Now, obviously there are multiple species of milkweed, and monarch larvae, the caterpillars, will eat multiple species of milkweed, but they have done studies and seen that the tropical milkweed can cause deformities in adult monarch butterflies. So when they emerge from their chrysalis, they can have especially like wing deformities, so they can't really fly. And I'm pretty sure, I don't think there's a lot of research on this, but I'm pretty sure that was only caused by the tropical milkweed, which I believe is from the Caribbean. I think that people probably like it better because it's got prettier flowers. The native milkweed in Florida has white flowers. The tropical milkweed has orange and yellow flowers, so people probably think it looks better. And that doesn't guarantee that it's going to cause deformities in the butterflies. But I don't understand why, since we have our own native variety of it, we need to be bringing in outside varieties. But all of that being said, I think that you're doing a disservice to say that we should only be planting native plants. And I think we need to think with more nuance and distinguish between native, non-native, and invasive. So for example, if you plant a loquat tree, loquats are all over the place in Florida. Loquats grow very, very well in Florida. Loquats are not native. Loquats come from Southeast Asia. So that's what you would call a non-native. But loquats are not damaging the ecosystem. They're not, taking over. It's not like a Kogan grass or kudzu scenario where, man, we planted a loquat and now there's literally no trees out there except for loquat. It's very easy to handle loquat. If you have a loquat tree in a local forest, when the fruits fall off, they will start to germinate and create more trees. But from my observations, a lot of those trees don't survive, probably because they're getting shaded out or crowded out by other trees and ground cover. But then also, if it's in your yard or something like that, it's very easy to get rid of loquat. If you see a young sapling, loquat sapling, they're not hard to dig out, and they don't spread through roots or anything like that. So when you dig it out, it's gone. It's not going to keep spreading. So some people would probably argue with me, but I would say loquat is not this nasty invasive that's taking over, and it's going to be the only trees you ever see in the forest anymore are going to be loquat trees. I just don't see that. Majority of your varieties of mulberries are not native to Florida. They're native to places like Southeast Asia or Near East Asia, like India, Pakistan, that sort of thing. Citrus, Florida used to have a thriving citrus industry. Citrus was a plant that was imported from, you guessed it, Southeast Asia, Far East, places like China, stuff like that, and it was brought to Florida, and it's safe to say that it is not an invasive, it's going to take over the whole ecosystem tree. So you're more than, again, I'm not knocking it. If you want to be a native only gardener, that's on you. That's your choice. I don't have any say in that. But the only thing that I get kind of aggravated with is when people take it upon themselves to come to your social media outlet and bash you for not only being native, and you're destroying the ecosystem, and you're really not. Now, there are, and like I said, we need to differentiate between non-native and invasive. I brought up Kogan grass and kudzu. Kogan grass, we don't have kudzu this far south in Florida, at least not yet. But Kogan grass is taking over, I think, the entire state. It was brought in, from what I understand, to help with soil erosion, but it absolutely has just taken over, and it's very hard to get rid of because it spreads by both seeds and by rhizomes. And so you can't just you can't go outside and light an entire field of Kogan grass on fire. If you don't get rid of the roots underground, it's going to continue to come back up. And to my knowledge, nothing eats Kogan grass. I've seen fields, cattle fields with Kogan grass in it, and nothing will eat it. There's no, the cattle won't eat it, anything like that. So it's just not, it is a purely invasive plant. So I would say that there is a difference between non-native and invasive. And if you want to be the kind of person who only grows native plants, whether it be, edibles or non-edibles, then that's fine. But you're kind of limiting yourself to what you can grow. As far as edibles go, as far as ornamentals, it's not as big of a deal. But as far as growing fruit and stuff like that, it's it's really, you're limiting yourself to what you can have. But if that's what you want to do, more power to you. It's just, we need to understand that there is not a problem with planting non-native species as long as it's not destroying the local ecosystem. And if it is something that can become invasive, being smart about it and not allowing it to take over. Being a responsible gardener, food forester, and making sure that this stays contained. And there's various ways to do that. I'm not going to get into it on this one. But yeah, I just think we need to think about, it's not just, native and then everything else is bad. Natives are good. There's a lot of non-natives that end up becoming naturalized, which is another ball of wax. A lot of things that people claim are native here, we don't really know if they're native here or if they've just been here for so long it's become naturalized. So there's a difference between native, and natives are good, naturalized or non-native species of plants can also be very good. And invasive plants, they're the ones that are more bad, but they can also be good if you handle them properly. So anyways, that's just my little rant. I was thinking about that the other day. Hopefully this video will load and it won't be corrupt like the last one. Let me know what you think. If you think that I'm totally crazy and I'm, just trying to destroy the ecosystem, you're welcome to leave that in the comments. I'm not going to, debate you on that, but let me know what you think, and I'll be posting a video soon about some stuff that I'm working on out in the food forest right now and give you a little update. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.